Because everybody sort of thinks, if you say you're running across America, the natural response of a lot of people is like Forrest Gump. I knew quite a lot about it, but of course it's a ridiculous distance. Somebody had already ran the second leg of the route, which is from Santa Monica to Maine. And I figured, well, seeing as I'd sort of got it into my head that I was going to attempt it, if one person had done one leg, it was only a matter of time before somebody else did the whole thing. And so it was time to go. Eventually, when we got to the finish, it was very similar to the final scene. We had sort of, in fact, we probably had more people there than Forrest did at the end, and sort of, including a lot of people who were very important to me. So that was pretty cool.
Hi, my name is Michelle Lewis. 10 years ago, you'd have been lucky to see me run to the end of the road. These days, running is second nature to me. From marathons to park runs to putting my own running group through their paces. You'll often see me in suitably loud attire, getting ready to pound the pavements. And here's a secret, if I can do it, you can too. There's so many wonderful and inspiring stories in the world of running. And not just running, some of my favourite tales involve those who take to their wheelchairs, bikes or simply their own trusty feet in an attempt to get fitter, faster or just have some fun. In this podcast, I'm going to be in conversation with some of the most inspiring and fascinating of these people. Remember, it's your time, your speed, your way. The only person you need to keep up with is yourself.
What a treat we have for you on this episode. Forrest Gump the movie, you may or may not have seen, is where Forrest just kept running and collected an army of fans along the way. Well, here we have the runner who actually did the route, Rob Pope, completing 15,700 miles over 422 days in 2016. Having achieved so much more since, Rob still does not appear to be slowing down. So let's find out how Rob's running tale began and what he has planned ahead. Over to you, Rob.
I guess it sort of started a long time ago when I was at school. Sort of a bit of on the fields of Liverpool and the Wirral in the mud in the winter, wearing a very sort of skimpy running vest. I'm pretty sure in these days that's actually counted as child cruelty, but they called it cross country then. And so I didn't really take it very seriously. I was always decent at running, but still I wasn't really one for training very hard. And so when I went to uni, I didn't really bother doing much running, but I would tend to do the London Marathon most years. And I'd train to do about 40 miles a week when I was doing that. It's only really when I went to Australia and I didn't really sort of think I was going to be the best candidate for playing Aussie rules football that I joined an athletics club and seemed to get, a lot better because, training didn't seem like such hard work anymore. And so I became Australian marathon champion in the final year when I was living there. Yeah, and then
what was that feeling like when you won like a first major marathon?
Technically, I only came 10th. Everybody in front of me was Kenyan or Japanese, and so I did confess as I went over the finish line that technically I wasn't Australian, but I'd been there long enough to qualify. So I wasn't going to argue beyond that. I knew I was running for the state of Victoria. And to be honest, if they picked me for that, then I wasn't going to protest too much, especially when I had a nice gold medal in my back pocket.
Was you a bit upset that it wasn't for the UK and that it was for Australia to win something that big?
No, not at all. I love being in Australia now, so I still sort of wonder I'll ever go back, and so I sort of feel that maybe I should go back and just become Australian, so the story actually makes more sense. Yeah. I ended up, it's a very long story as well, so I ended up becoming Oregon state champion in the 10K on my run across the states as well. So I've got a habit of being a little bit of a running cuckoo, turning up to all these places and nicking a medal and then starting off somewhere else.
So then tell us how Forrest Gump, the route, happens. Obviously you watched the movie and thought, no one's done it, I'm going to do it? Or was it someone gave you a bet or what?
I'd wanted to run across America for years, like sort of way before I went to Australia. And, you know, when you're thinking about ways to run across, everybody sort of thinks, you know, if you say you're running across America, the natural response of a lot of people is like Forrest Gump. And so I knew the route procrastinator, and I like to sort of, instead of doing useful things, I like to like Google stuff like what route did Forrest take. And so I knew quite a lot about it, but of course it's a, you know, a ridiculous distance. And, you know, I still think even to this day, nobody's ever done a continuous run in the same country. That's as far as that. So, you know, it's natural that you don't, you know, sort of have it at the top of your to-do list. Somebody had already ran the second leg of the route, which is from Santa Monica to Maine. And I figured, well, seeing as I'd sort of got it into my head that I was going to attempt it, if one person had done one leg, it was only a matter of time before somebody else did the whole thing. And so it was time to go.
So you grew the beard, you grew the hair, you wore that similar outfit. You know, what was it like when you was running the route? Did you build up an army like Forrest did, or was it on your own most of the time?
Early online, I got a few people that would follow me along the run, but like I said, it wasn't ever sort of a troop, which is good, because seeing as I was like funding it myself, I didn't really fancy buying everybody dinner and a gang of 40 following behind me, you know. Eventually when we got to the finish, it was very similar to the final scene. We had sort of, in fact, we probably had more people there than Forrest did at the end, and sort of, you know, including a lot of people who were very important to me. So that was pretty cool.
And did you have like a team, like someone in the car? Because obviously you weren't going A to Z and back to A again. You was literally just continuing. So someone had to carry all your luggage, your food and water. How much planning went into it?
I had two teams, but you couldn't really call either of them a team. The first one sort of was my girlfriend, now my wife, Nadine, who we basically bought an old camper van, and sort of she was in that. But, you know, barring the odd welcome cameo appearance from a friend or two, she did all that sort of heavy lifting herself. And the second team was Pram Solo, the stroller that I bought in Australia, and then sort of, you know, it was our job to carry everything.
Oh no. So did you actually do like, you know, the foot in the ocean one end, other foot in the other end?
Yeah, exactly. Like sort of, if you're running across a continent, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't count if you get in the water. That was an advice passed on to me by a chap called Chris Finnell. Chris has ran every London Marathon that there's ever been, you know, sort of, and so he's recently just completed his 40th, and of course, you know, the 40th edition of the race. And he'd run across the States before, and he made sure, he said, it only counts if you get in the water afterwards. So I didn't actually start at the ocean, but I made sure that within a day or two I'd got to the ocean so I could get my feet in the Atlantic to start with, so it would count as a crossing. Then of course I'd hit the Pacific, then the Atlantic, then the Pacific, then the Atlantic for, you know, a good few times. And I've actually got a little amulet that I made so that contains some of the water from the first dip in the Atlantic and the first dip in the Pacific as well. So I carried that with me the whole way.
Wow, that's a good idea as well. And like, oh, I just don't know how you did it, because I'm just like thinking, you went 4 times, didn't you, across America?
Yeah, distance-wise, they count at 2,766 miles, which is I think the shortest distance from LA to New York. So distance-wise, I actually went across 6 times pretty much, but it was geographically about 4 3/4, because of course, you know, Forrest doesn't finish at an ocean; he finishes in the middle of nowhere, which is where I ended up.
422 days. Did you run every day?
There were no like deliberate rest days. Like I wasn't like taking a rest day. Unfortunately, some of them were forced on us. Like say for example, like when the RV broke down and we literally had to get it fixed. You know, you can't do anything about that. And then I lost 4 days to injury where I like just physically couldn't do anything. and 5 days to food poisoning. But beyond that, that was it.
Did you do any training other than you was a marathon runner? Did you do any training building up? I know it's really a silly question. How can you really prepare for that sort of mileage, in over a year?
Like I didn't do any training at all, really. I can now look back on it and pretend I was being really cool and go, oh, well, Forrest didn't train. He just put his shoes on and he went. But it's just because I just didn't really think it through. And I was probably running about, there's a lot of like runners who will do 20, 30, 40 miles a week as just their random sort of, training or keeping fit regime. And that's what I was doing. I wasn't increasing any distance. I just figured I'd work it out on the way. And if I had my time again, I wouldn't do any more running training, but I would definitely have made sure that I was a lot more flexible and that my core was a lot stronger, because that did come back to haunt me a few times.
Did it? I was going to say, what sort of injuries did you have along the way?
Well, I got the blisters that you would have a couple of weeks, but once they'd gone, that was it really. I got tendonitis in my anterior tibialis muscle about 500 miles in. I didn't take any days off with that. I managed to get through it with still a little bit of walking, altering my pace. Saw a really cool physio in Houston called Whitney. That is not a fabrication. And I then went on to Phoenix, where I started getting a bit of one of the nightmare injuries that runners fear, and I just taped and got on with that. I tore my quad in between Arkansas and Memphis, Tennessee. And so that was one of the days I ended up having 2 days off with that, and then started walking after 2 days. Then what was next? I started just getting niggles. Then everything was tightening up in my pelvis, and so I would get like sort of a pelvic pain, such I would like try and sort of, I'd be fighting fires with stretching and rolling and, using those massage balls, but I would never generally be completely pain free. But it wasn't, so you say, I was always in pain, but it didn't mean every day was miserable. It's sort of, you agree to just be able to get through it.
Have you had any lasting effects on your body?
I definitely am a lot tighter. I got injured quite a bit when I came back, just trying to run fast again, just because I think obviously to really run fast, it's the combination of cadence, i.e. the amount of steps you can take a minute, and your running stride. So not being very tall anyway, I was always a fairly high cadence runner, but I didn't have a really restricted stride. But when I came back and it was restricted further, I'm getting back there now, like in terms of thing, to the point where, sort of I'm thinking I'm associated a lot with sort of ultra running at the moment, but I wouldn't mind going back to do a couple of quick marathons just because I'm getting older, and I'd almost like the opportunity to train really hard for a 42K and just see, basically at the start line, knowing that I've trained as well as I physically could, get whatever time I get. And if I PB, fantastic, that would be amazing. But if I don't, I'm actually quite cool with that, because it would allow me to embrace the concept of aging and just go, well, cool. So I am 42 this year, and so I'm calling the whole thing Project 42. And so I'm going to try and see if I can, sort of beat my PB in the marathon, and, we'll see where that takes me. So
we'll talk about your PBs, but one more question I want to relate to the America one. I have to ask, how many pairs of trainers did you go through?
I went through 33 in total, and sort of on one pair of Cortez as well, because, that's the reason why I was the person to do this Gump run, because somebody may have done it and not really embraced it, but there was no way I was never going to shave all my hair off at the start and then not get it done, including the beard, until the end. So, there's I think there's a quote in The Big Lebowski, isn't it? It's like, sometimes there's a dude, and I think I was the dude for it.
So what was your best experience during I know I said the trainers was the last question, but you must have seen some sights. I know you're into wildlife, you are into nature. You must have seen some amazing, sights when you went across. What was the one that really stood out to you?
God, like sort of maybe the most beautiful place sort of I saw in a real breathtaking way was Glacier National Park, and named for the glaciers, but by 2030 there will be no glaciers. So it was sort of tragically beautiful in a way. But my favourite photo of the run is probably still there. It's me running like with Nadine took the photo with a lovely like mountainous backdrop and sort of late summer, and so that was fantastic. And generally though, like so I just love being in the desert. I remember like sort of the day where I sort of left California for the final time, and like Lake Tahoe, which I just left from, was one of the places I really wanted to see. It's every bit as beautiful as Glacier. But then when I ascended out of that valley over the hills and dropped down into Nevada and saw the desert in front of me, the excitement was just unbelievable, so I really came alive like when that happened. And so time spent in the desert, Joshua Tree National Park's unbelievable.
You do like the heat. I personally am no good with the heat. I am a marathon runner, and the marathons I've done, I've moaned like hell when it's been boiling hot. But you last year have done a race I would love to do but never done, and that was the ultra marathon in the Sahara Desert. How was it? 'Cause it just looked amazing when I've watched it on YouTube. I've followed runners that I know from following on Facebook.
What would it have been? It would have been 2000, I think, and I was about 2 months away from the start line when I did my longest ever run at that point. Like so on a treadmill in the gym, like I can go on a treadmill for hours. It's sort of I really like it. Maybe it's sort of prepared me for those long desert roads, and I felt great. I had a big pack on my back, and then the next day I went out for another run and ran up a hill trying to catch this guy and tore my hip flexor. So, another 18 years before I would get to that start line. So it was a long time coming. And it's just brilliant, like from the journey where you all go out there together, and it turned out we were on our bus, we were sitting 4 rows in front of like the elite Moroccans that would win the race. And a guy who was in our little group asked this chap, had he run the race before? Cue hysterics from the Moroccans when they said he's won it for the last 6 years, One of our tent guys was having a really bad day, and he was like limping his way from the finish line back to the tent. On one of the stages, and like sort of the guys who were in the elites tent just came and carried his water and brought it in for him. So it's just like there's no like sort of them and us there. And the one thing is, it calls itself the hardest race on earth, which a lot of people have sort of poured a bit of cold water on because they're saying it's not hard, which I think is a rough discrimination anyway. But the thing is, it's a bit like circuit training. Because it's as hard as you make it, and it's harder for different reasons. If you go do circuits in the gym, you wouldn't be able to tell, judging by the expressions on faces, who was fit and who wasn't at the end of it, because if you really push hard, everybody comes out of it as knackered as one another. And if you run really fast in the MDS, your quads are shot, you're nutritionally struggling to get by. But if you take your time there, you get cooked. And so it's a different ordeal depending on sort of, how far, so how fast you want to push during the race. And so anybody, I think, who does a lot of running, or even anybody who does a lot of trekking could complete it. But by doing it slowly, don't think you're going to get an easy ride.
I know, but with the Marathon des Sables, like how hot does it get during the day? It just looks unbearable.
I think the hottest we got was like sort of like 38, but we didn't get it for as long as some of the times. We had it quite windy, which sort of dries you out a bit more. And it does get really, really hot, but you really adjust to it like sort of quite quickly. You do start sort of in the morning. Later in the week, if you were in the top 50, you would have to start 3 hours after everybody else. They were the long stages, and so you would quite often be, I think it was a midday start, and the glorious start line was replaced literally just by a line in the sand, which made it like sort of feel really hardcore. When we saw clouds above the start line, that was like an absolute blessing, but they didn't stick around for long, and you knew you were heading for a whole day in the sun.
You have to carry everything, don't you? You have to carry your backpack, you have to carry your food, your water, any clothing that you need. Did you feel the weight?
I'd done a bit of training with a weight pack before, and generally it didn't really bother me. Like, sort of, I think, sort of, even though I'm small, and I look really thin if you look at me, but I'm reasonably sort of stocky. I've got like sort of weird twig-like arms and legs, but a fairly stocky upper body, and so I don't think sort of the putting that weight on my back was as much of a problem for a lot of people. You don't have to carry all your water for the week, which is fortunate. They do replenish it, and at these checkpoints, and I was just awful at the checkpoints. Just being a novice, you'd see the real elite guys come in. Now, of course, somehow I'd managed to find myself up at the front. I think I was winning for some point on the first day, which is good. I'll be able to say I was winning the MDS at one point, even though it'll never feature in the history books. And I get into the checkpoints about a minute ahead of these elite guys, and then I wasn't resting at all. I was literally trying to get as much water on me as possible and sort of do these things. And then they'd just literally be off, and I'd be like, how are you doing this? So I learned, I think, some tricks. I think next time I might not take my own water bottles, and I might just literally grab the water bottles that they give you and use that. That makes sense. There we go. Thinking, always thinking.
I was watching it a couple of years ago when a Japanese guy did it. He had the whole Japanese outfit and I don't know what you call the Japanese shoes, the old traditional flip-flop.
I know, I'm picturing, yeah. They're hardly Nike Wild Horse, are they?
But he still did it, and he wasn't a young chap either. I was just like, you say like anyone,
yeah.
But in some sense, yeah, watching him, because I was glued to the marathon just because I was like, is he gonna do it? And he did. Have you done the comrades?
No, not yet, and it was a real shame because I was thinking about doing it this year, and it was actually going to be on my birthday, which would have been brilliant. But so I've got my eye on. There's certain medal categories in the comrades, and I do have my eye on sort of one of them. I ain't going to win that. Like, so it's attracting too many ninjas, but I would like to get myself the gold medal. Sort of in that, which I think is to do it under 8 hours.
I have never done the comrades, but it's one of my favourite races to watch. I've spent the whole 12 hours watching it because I cannot believe that, like you say, the ninjas, the fast runners that do it in like 6 hours. But for me, it's the 12th hour when you've got those runners with one foot over the line and the other foot, the other side, and they're told doesn't count.
I turn off after 11:50. I'm too sensitive. So I just don't need that level of like cruelty in my life. So I do have a friend actually. He's since completed it a couple of times, but the first time he did the comrades, he was a near miss. He wasn't quite getting bounced back out, as he saw the line, but he was only a couple of minutes away from the cutoff. And so it is a bit rough. I really wish that they had one more category medal,
So please, I really hope that you do it, because it would be just great to have a British guy do it and get up there within the gold medal, because it's just such a hard race.
I reckon Tom Evans would do a pretty decent stab at it, so maybe I could slipstream him for a bit because I think he's bigger than me. I don't know if I can hold on to him for the whole race, but I'll certainly be able to do it for halfway, I reckon.
Oh, but you seem like, in a polite way, an absolute bonkers of a guy. So I want to know, and I'm sure listeners want to know, have you ever considered doing the Barkley marathons?
The weird thing is, I actually hadn't for a while, like sort of, but sort of it's. I think as you delve more into the ultra thing, you know, I'd sort of realised I'd quite like to do the Bartley maybe before I saw the Netflix documentary. Then you see the Netflix documentary, and then you're thinking, I'm not so sure. But I'd actually like to go and do a couple of the other races that Laz does in Tennessee. You know, so if I did the Barkley one day, that'd be fantastic. But they've got a race called the Vol State, and of all the states I ran in America, I don't think I could ever say I had a favourite state, but Tennessee was so special for me. That was the state that made me think that, hang on, if I was self-supported in this run, you know, just me and Pram solo, it was the first state I was on my own, and I didn't think I'd be able to handle it. And if it wasn't for the people in Tennessee, because they were just incredible, I probably would have quit at Maine. And to run across Tennessee in a race would be great. And that's a hot one as well. It's a hot and sweaty one. But yeah, the Barkley would be cool. I've met John Kelly before, and like sort of, you know, he doesn't look clinically insane. And so if normal people like that can do it, I say normal, he's obviously a little bit bonkers, like, you know, but he's relatively normal. And maybe if he can come out of that unscathed and still smile, maybe I could.
I do. I just think that knowing about you, the type of runs and your mentality, I just think you're a good hopeful for Great Britain to, you know, get us on that map and be one of the very few to do all 5 of the marathons. It's an absolute bonkers race, and I just love it. It's just a crazy race. It's even the way Laz starts the race by lighting a cigarette from beginning to end. It's just crazy, isn't it? It's just.
I think it's a sort of race that might actually make you take up smoking by the end. But I will always have a slight niche bit of history with Barkley, whether I do it or not. In that I'm pretty certain I'm the only person who's ever run from Badwater to Barkley. Now, I was due to actually be crewing Josh Stevens in Badwater this year, so that would have been good to have taken a little look. But I was camping basically outside a bar in a place called Petros in Tennessee. They had a little campsite outside. That was my excuse for going into the bar. Obviously, I didn't do that anywhere else on the whole run. And one of the locals said to me, they said, "Are you going up Ratjaw?" And I knew what Ratjaw was. It's one of the famous hills in the Barkley. And I just went to him like, "Ratjaw?" And he went, "Yeah, mate, just outside." And so we went out the bar, and he just pointed up the hill, and I saw that characteristic vista of the pylons having had that passage carved through the trees. But of course, that passage has since been reclaimed by the briars that like to make such a mess of people's legs. And so I told him that in no uncertain terms that pushing a stroller, I would not be going up Ratjaw. Maybe if I did a lap of the Barkley with a stroller, that would count as a full one.
Yeah, true. So you were saying earlier that you want to get back to marathons. You're well known at the Liverpool Rock and Roll Marathon. I did the half a couple of years ago, so I know the part of the route, and I love the Penny Lane bit where they blast the speakers. Is that one of the marathons you're thinking of going back and thinking, yeah, I'm going to break a record there?
I will do Liverpool, but it seems strange saying it, seeing that's where I have done my fastest marathon. I did that without a watch, and so it shows maybe the merits of running free rather than getting hung up on a time. But there's only so many marathons you can run. I'd probably do Liverpool more as just want to soak up the experience this time, because it's great to be running around your hometown. Funny story actually. I was running through Cleveland on the third leg of my run, and I see a lady on a bike coming towards me, and she's wearing this canary yellow T-shirt, and I sort of stop her pushing this pram, and she must have thought, "Good God, what's this?" And I said, "Is that Liverpool Marathon T-shirt?" And she was just like, "Yeah." I went, "It's like 2015 one." She went, "Yeah, when I run that as well." And she was like, "Oh my God!" Said, "How did you do?" And I felt a bit bad by going, oh yeah, I won it. And like sort of I felt like a little bit of a big head there, but like sort of, you know, I didn't accost her just to tell her that. It's just so strange to see that shirt there and then. So other marathons I like to look at, you know, I'd like to do a couple of, you know, Berlin obviously. It's just tricky at the moment. How do you plan for it? You know, I don't even know if these races are doing ballots at the moment. Like, is London doing the ballot for next year? Who knows, you know? And then Rotterdam, Frankfurt, one of the real speeds to marathons, I think, you know?
I've done Rotterdam. It's boring. No.
Is it really?
I didn't enjoy one of the few marathons I didn't enjoy. So I really...
What's your favourite one?
Barcelona.
Barcelona, such a beautiful horizon.
Yeah, it was just from beginning to end. It was like they play Queen, you have all the, you know, confetti coming down at the start. You go off in 4 waves. The atmosphere they have, and I don't know, a lot of it is, I think, the nutrition as well. Every mile they have bananas and orange segments and water, and that for me worked really well. And it's each for, you know, everyone's got their own way with marathons, but it just, the setup was just perfect for me. And yeah, that has to be. So if you haven't done Barcelona, do Barcelona.
On the list, it'll be on the list.
I did do Seattle last year, so I've come close to experiencing your America adventure. But
That's cool.
That was hilly. But I tell you, I loved every bit of it. What is, obviously you've got the COVID and everything at the moment. What have you been doing with your time? You know, have you thought, oh, I'll get more into my yoga? Have you still been going out for short runs? How have you managed the last 6-7 months?
Yeah, I've just been keeping things ticking over. Like, so I've not been doing big miles or anything like that, you know, sort of, I'm sort of just starting to think about maybe moving into some sort of a training cycle now to you know, sort of prepare for whatever might happen in the next few months. But yeah, as I said, like, so I was doing a bit of yoga. I actually got a turbo trainer during lockdown, and so I was sort of starting to do a little bit more of the old cycling things. I'm just not a big one for cycling on the roads. I just can't be, well, I can't be bothered. I'm risk averse these days in terms of traffic after having a few near misses on the roads in the States. And, you know, I can't really be bothered stopping at traffic lights. I quite like the old turbo training. As I said, I'm great with sort of on a treadmill, and I think I just need to get myself a little bit of a pain cave with you know, put the turbo, get myself a treadmill, and then I can maybe do some of that hill training. You can send me some of your hill workouts and I'll get on the treadmill and do that. There ain't many hills in Liverpool.
Definitely. But you have got nice routes in Liverpool, so...
Yeah, exactly. As I say, that's why I really do like the Liverpool Marathon, because it's one of these ones that genuinely does make the effort to get you to see, like, sort of, you know, the cool things you want to see in the city. Like, so if you were a tourist and you only had one day to spend in Liverpool, you know, so if you can run a bit, I would recommend just doing the marathon. It'll tick everything off the box.
True. See, you've sold it. You've sold Liverpool Marathon. So, Rob, we need to know, are you a park runner?
I am indeed. Yeah, my local park run is Croxteth Park. I've done a good few others. I've done a little bit of tourism. I actually didn't get to do a single one when I was in the States. My arrival in any of the few cities that have them, because it's just not really a thing over there, was never on a sort of Saturday morning. But, you know, I've done ones in Dublin. I've done ones in Adelaide in Australia, and so, and a few around the UK. So, but Croxteth Park, which is an absolutely lovely one. If anyone's a bit of a tourist, I really recommend Croxteth Park one. And there's a cafe right by the finish as well.
Have you ever been to Bushy, the home of Park Run?
I should do, shouldn't I? You know, sort of. I don't know how they're going to manage the phased return. Like, so I think that you have to book a slot, and it'd be like sort of 6:30 on a Saturday night. You know, I think if I did Bushy, it's quite often like sort of I probably only do maybe. As I work weekends quite a bit, and so, and I've also my other half works weekends, so I don't tend to get to as many as I would like to. So probably once a month if I'm lucky, and then maybe 3 times a year I'll try and do like a quick one. If I went to Bushy, I would make that one of the quick ones, just because I know how many good runners that there are there, and I think it'd be pretty good to get dragged along.
Well, my local park run is Northampton Park Run. So, Rob, you have to come to Northampton, please, because we're also like a PB. We're tarmac. We're one big loop and then one small loop. And we have, diversity. We have wheelchair users, visually impaired, deaf runners. We're open to all, like most park runs. We'd love to have you at Northampton Park Run when we're back up and back to normal, so to speak.
Yeah, hopefully a nice spring return, maybe a spring bank holiday, and we'll all be back on our respective 5K loops.
Yes, yeah, I'm so pleased that you have a park run barcode. You don't know how happy I am.
Yeah, the one thing is I'm a swine for forgetting I should have had my 50 by now, but I'm a swine for actually forgetting the barcode. And so I was quite successful when I managed to stick it in my phone case, because then I'd remember to have everything with me. But quite often I'd just turn up there. They'd actually be one of the ones where I'd try and win, because then I could just say, they probably make the effort to register your time on a guest one, sort of, if you've won it. So.
Have you ever volunteered at Park Run, Rob? Now, come on, truth now.
No, I haven't actually. Listen, the one thing is, like, the Crux of the Park one, so their team of volunteers is just so incredible. Like, sort of Chris and Tony Baker lead a great crew, and I don't really think they have much need for them, really. It's just as I imagine a lot of park runs are. It's just very much one big family, and certainly, if I was asked and I was free, I'd be up for doing that. Maybe if I ever get injured, touch wood, that doesn't happen. That should be how I should spend my Saturday mornings.
You are definitely coming to Northampton Park Run. I'm not letting you get away. So, Rob, anyone that's just about to start running, what best tips can you give?
So the best tip I would give is, regardless of how good or bad you think you are, most new runners usually think they're very bad. If you set yourself the goal of doing it 3 times a week, even if you think that one of your runs was complete junk and you shouldn't have bothered doing it because you ended up walking most of it, you need to do that for at least 4 or 5 weeks, because it's only after that your body will start to go, is this what we're doing? And yeah, all right, because you'll do it for the first couple of runs and you think, oh, this is all right, isn't it? The third run you'll probably be a bit tired and you'll just go, oh, I actually am rubbish at this. Then the second week your motivation might dip a bit, and because you're still tired, then you're definitely rubbish at it. And a lot of people will jack it in on the third week because they're just going, I just don't understand what anybody gets from this. But it's just weird. You probably won't even notice it until midway through a run on your 5th or 6th week, and you just go, hang on, this is all right, this, And you'll realise that the last 4 runs that you've hated are not going to be the way forward in the future. So just please persist. Listen to me. I'll bet you a cake at a park run of your choice that you will enjoy it if you stick with it properly. So
one thing I really want to know is, what is your must-have treat after your big races or runs?
I usually straight to the pub. That's for me. Certainly on the America run, 422 days, I definitely had 422 beers sort of during the course of that run. And obviously some days were multiple, some days I wasn't there, but I think I had a beer brewed in every state, apart from Wyoming, which I narrowly missed out on. And donuts as well. Yeah, donuts are a big thing. And if I'm really struggling, obviously a can of the old Red Bull sort me out.
Oh, okay. Well, with that note, we'll end it there. So thanks, Rob, for sharing your running tale.
Thanks very much.
I hope you enjoyed this week's Running Tales podcast. Please, please, please leave us a rating or review wherever you listen. It helps other people find us so they can listen too. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week for another Running Tale.